It is incomprehensible and unspeakable that corporations now are taking advantage of this crisis in order to get tax breaks and subsidies that have nothing to do with the coronavirus. And the Congress must be very clear. No tax breaks, no subsidies to these corporations.
So as we've been noting over the past few days, no one has been showing more leadership during this crisis than Bernie Sanders. The current president, Donald Trump, is spouting lie after lie, misinformation after misinformation to the American people, and that's leaving them unprepared to weather the crisis. And Joe Biden, who the mainstream media and Democratic Party elite have crowned as the nominee already, is basically missing in action. We haven't seen him in a week. His Twitter account occasionally spouts out a message that's typed by an 18-year-old intern, but we haven't seen Joe Biden at a crucial moment in American history. He's done nothing, and Trump has done everything he can in the wrong ways. Bernie Sanders is showing leadership. We've talked about this in terms of his fundraising, how he centered his campaign on helping Americans through this current health crisis, how to weather the storm immediately, but also how to build a future infrastructure to prevent it from happening again. And Bernie has an important message yet again today to Donald Trump and to the political establishment. Don't bail out the corporations, bail out the people. That's what matters. Bernie Sanders on Twitter just a couple hours ago basically listed out a series of corporations and mega-sized industries that are all clamoring for government intervention and bailouts right now because of their poor decision-making in the good years, in the years of economic prosperity, basically the last decade of unsustainable speculative growth. These corporations have reaped billions upon billions upon billions, if not trillions total, in amounts of profit. And now that they're facing this current crisis, which is both health-based but also economic, they are crying to the government for a bailout. These are often the sorts of businesses that treat their workers poorly, that when it came down to choosing between raising wages and improving working standards on the one hand, and using their cash to buy stock buybacks and pay out mega bonuses on the other, these corporations clearly made the choice, leaving working people, leaving consumers, leaving the environment, leaving communities behind. And now, when they need help, they're crawling to the government, asking for billions, in some cases, hundreds of billions of dollars from the government. And Bernie Sanders says this is not the time to just give a blank check to Donald Trump and the GOP to hand out billions, if not trillions, to their corporate bigwig friends. Right now is the time to ensure that any aid is predicated on the needs of working class, poor, and middle class people first and foremost. That has to be the focus, on ensuring that those people have what they need to survive, but also because if you want a strong economic bailout, it needs to be centered on working people. And you can, to a certain degree, even throw in small businesses to that group as well, because it's those groups that will not be able to weather the storm. These corporations with billions and billions of dollars, and these corporations that will inevitably be able to capitalize on rock bottom interest rates and they can borrow money, will not need the same level of immediate support, nor do they deserve it as much as regular working class, middle class, and poor people. So Bernie Sanders' plan is centered on that. Giving every single person, because it's the quickest way to do it, even if some rich people will get money, giving every single person $2,000, giving them that immediate aid they need to buy food, doing things like canceling student loan repayments temporarily, doing things like fighting for the rights of tenants who may be evicted or who are being threatened with eviction. All of these sorts of moves, in a sense, bail out the people. The people don't really need to be bailed out because they never did anything wrong, but the people need support in this moment, and Donald Trump and the Republicans aren't offering it. Their plans have the image of helping people, but most of the money, most of the attention is going to the rich and wealthy and well-connected and the world's biggest corporations, and it leaves the absolute poorest people, leave people who were already struggling before this crisis even further behind, getting less aid, not more aid as they need, but less aid than everybody else. And the Democratic establishment, for the most part, has been woefully unwilling to offer a clear and persuasive alternative to Donald Trump's approach. They've been unwilling to challenge the corporate-centric bailout policy. They've been unwilling to make a clear stand in terms of bailing out the people in all of the sorts of ways they need to be bailed out. And besides a few Democratic congressional figures like Ilhan Omar, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Mark Pauken, Pramila Jayapal, Maxine Waters, all of these people have sort of made, good proposals. Most of the Democratic establishment, like Pelosi and like Joe Biden, have said negative things, or they've said nothing at all. They are going to roll over to Donald Trump because they don't show leadership, they don't have strength, and most crucially, they don't want to sound like they want what Trump wants, but behind closed doors, they're happy with Donald Trump's corporate-centric bailout policy because they give almost the same few damns about working and middle-class people that Donald Trump and the GOP cronies do. This is a crucial test to get things right. The last crisis, 10 or so years ago, 12 years ago, was one where changes could have been made that would have prevented the sorts of injustices we're seeing right now from happening again. But a Democratic president elected on hope and change kowtowed to corporate interests, and nothing changed. 10 years later, we're in another crisis, and 10 years later, we're trying to do the same things we did last time. Trillions to the big banks, trillions to the biggest corporations, crumbs at best for the poor, the working class, and middle class. It's unacceptable. We need a different approach this time. We need a democratic socialist approach this time. No corporation should get a single bit of bailout money until working people have been taken care of, and until Ali Velshi and many others have noted that these corporations agree to stringent strings attached for any bailout. Shares owned by the people, guarantees of rehiring workers, guarantees of better working standards going forward after this crisis, guarantees of capped CEO compensation, guarantees to end the practice of stock buybacks. These are things we need to see, but we won't see unless Bernie Sanders becomes the Democratic nominee and the president, because Joe Biden won't do anything except hide in his house in Delaware, and Nancy Pelosi won't do anything but roll over to Donald Trump. And of course, we know Donald Trump and the GOP, if anything, they're trying to sell their stock before the regular people could be bailed out. They're working for big business. Bernie Sanders is 100% right, folks. If you want to build a society based on justice, and if you want an equitable economic recovery when this is all done, bail out the people.